Hey guys, so today we have a very special guest with us. We have a good friend of mine and a longtime student, Jaden Clark here. But Jaden was actually one of my first students, and it was a total joy to work with him. He was certainly my longest time student. Some of you guys might be aware of Jaden through the Jazz Gym. He's one of our Jazz Gym coaches, and you might be aware that I don't teach anymore privately. I have sort of made it my goal, over these past few years outside of performance and touring, to figure out essentially the best way to help people improve as musicians, and more specifically improvising jazz musicians. And I think we've finally found what I really consider to be the most effective way, if you're game for it, is to work with us literally every single day. And we've now finally set up a membership program where you can do that. And Jaden and myself are both coaches or trainers of that program. It's called the Jazz Gym. If you haven't already seen it or checked it out, make sure to do so. But today, I just wanted to profile Jaden a little bit. He's one of my favorite young tenor players on the scene. He just graduated from San Francisco Conservatory. And so through studying jazz in high school and at the conservatory level, formally, in jazz studies, Jaden was able to get a really thorough education in jazz music. And for me, it was really a privilege to be part of his studies for 7 years straight. I learned a lot from being able to work with him this closely for such a long period of time. But I thought it would be really cool to show you guys and talk about some certain concepts that Jaden thought were particularly helpful for him. So what was square one for you? Where did it all start? How did you pick up the saxophone? What were the first things that you did?
Yeah, so square one was actually the clarinet. And that's actually because my hands were too small for the saxophone. So
right.
Kind of had to start out there, but I, absolutely grateful that I did start out there. But eventually found my way into jazz music when I was about 15. So my local, I guess you could say, conservatory, they needed a second alto player. From then on, I ended up taking that position, and I was very fortunate to have a super enthusiastic band director in the name of Eric Dunez, actually from the US. And he pushed me into it. It seemed really encouraging at the time, and I never really looked back. I figured, okay, well, this is something that's coming fairly natural to me, at least musically speaking. Whereas classical clarinet, I didn't seem to gain too much traction before then.
Wasn't as exciting for you.
Yes, exactly. And I wasn't as motivated to practice. So that's when I really picked up the saxophone, made it my main instrument, got myself a tenor saxophone, and sort of haven't really looked back from there on in.
So Eric, he was the one who essentially turned you on to jazz.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah.
And his enthusiasm is a great asset to sort of my hometown of Wollongong, which is slightly south of Sydney, about a couple of hours south. But and he was a great asset, just super encouraging, always helping me out and pointing me in the right direction.
So with Eric, he was essentially like your band director, right? And so what was square one for him, hipping you to jazz, and then where did you go from there? Yeah,
so square one would have been me taking the second alto part and getting a solo, and him pointing at me and just saying, play. Throwing me straight in the deep end. And lo and behold, it ended up working out okay. And of course, that's why my then private teacher at the time, David Regler, we started taking it a little more seriously, just introduced the pentatonic scale, started playing over impressions or so what, just using the two pentatonic scales over that tune. And it took off from there. Started to get a deeper understanding of how to approach chord changes and to approach them a little more linearly. Started just piecing all the Lego blocks together. Kind of fast forward a couple of years, that's how I got into Shad. And I still remember to this day going to my parents. Obviously I was not funding my lessons when I was about 15. Still going to my parents and just saying, there's this guy, he runs these Skype lessons. He's really, really amazing, and he's actually getting some cool YouTube videos. I want to get in and take lessons with this guy before he takes off and doesn't take private students anymore.
All right, so if we were to like categorize a bunch of the things that we worked on together, like, a few things off the top of my head that stick out, like we definitely did a lot of like technical work on something that I consider to be a really practical thing to practice because it really ties into like developing lines. But we did a lot of stuff with approach notes and closures for sure, right?
Yeah.
Pentatonics, you're always eating that up for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think something about the poppiness, at least when you're only using one pentatonic scale, and then of course when you combine all of them, it turns into a jazz scientist study.
Yeah, but it's intense. It's cool. People feel that for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. It's like a color. I think of it as like the sounds of a rainbow. If you're able to, to shift between them fluently, that's kind of what comes to mind.
Yeah. We did like at least 2 Lester Young solos for sure. I remember you ate up those melodic cell exercises. Those are really good for like technique,
absolutely.
Dexterity.
Yeah.
A lot of focus, like when we were working on exercises for playing on tunes, we were doing a lot of like voice leading stuff for melodicism.
Absolutely,
for sure.
yeah.
And a lot of like diatonic soloing, like just playing the chord scales for every single chord, to just make your lines as melodic as possible as an exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really the vegetables of jazz.
Yeah, right.
Consider it that way.
Yeah.
I think, and then the great thing about that is being able to do that is you can then add all of these extra concepts over it, and they tend to just overlap, which is what's so great about the music. Is I like to think of it in Lego blocks. I mean, as long as you have the blocks there, you can put them together in different orders, and they all fit together quite nicely.
Yeah, man, you were freaking busy. You were really busy. I remember you would just have one thing to the other, but you would get it all done. And I think a lot of people think that like, oh, you just have to have like these hours open. You know, a lot of people think they're too busy to practice. When if you just like designate an hour every day, like you just get it done every day, or better yet, a couple hours if you can get it in. But like you would schedule it in, and I hear the excuse so often, like, oh, I'm too busy to practice, or I just don't have the time right now. It's like, man, everybody has an hour if it's something that they like to do. I think the problem is that, we get overwhelmed thinking about, how far away that level is that we want to get to, but it's not about that. It's just about like loving the process, accepting the process, and enjoying it in the moment. practicing scales for 15 minutes is fun if it's just for 15 minutes. So many people think that like you have to sit down and practice the same thing for an hour. Like just sit down and practice scales for 15 minutes or a technique exercise for 15 minutes. Practice a tune for 15 minutes. Practice a phrase or transcription for 15 minutes, just like have it scheduled in like that. Then you're going to have fun with it. You can jam at the end and just enjoy yourself, which is really important, which I think people have to remember because, you were working a couple jobs and taking classes at the conservatory that weren't just for your lesson and doing other assignments and stuff like that. And you always fit in the time to practice, which for me was really inspiring to see. Because I think for any age, not just a college kid, you were really organized and regimented about that. And honestly, routine is what, kind of inspired, us, the jazz lesson video guys to put together this jazz gym thing. Because, for me, I realized I was kind of getting out of a routine a little bit, with just life and touring, being in and out of town, just all the real life things that you have to do, and it was always kind of taking over. It was always taking priority over practicing, for a while. And I really wanted to get back to it. And so we put together this jazz gym thing with the idea that you could actually schedule it as part of your day every single day. And it's fun to see that like every morning, like 9 a.m. Eastern or 9 p.m. Eastern, which is 9 a.m. Sydney time or whatever, like we're seeing people are coming to these slots every single day and just diving into it. And it's really fun and exciting, especially when we see the improvement that everybody makes. So it's been nice to, kind of take the inspiration of routine and put that into this jazz gym program that you've been a trainer for.